All right, guys, welcome everyone to the ODSC APAC warm-up event. We have a special guest today. It's none other than Ben Taylor. He's also one of the keynote speakers at the APAC ODSC conference on the 15th and 16th of September, guys. So we'll be talking today a lot about MLOps and AI. We obviously know how much Ben loves AI, so definitely talking a lot around that and MLOps. We'll also be having my colleague Seamus McGowan, who is very interested in the subject today. So we'll have him today as well. Okay, before calling them in, I would just like to give you guys a quick overview about our upcoming event, upcoming conference, ODSC APAC. I will quickly now share my screen for you guys to have a look at it. All right, there we go. Okay, I can see that everyone can look at it. So yes, this is ODSC APAC warm-up event and talking a little about the ODSC virtual conference that is coming up on the 15th and 16th of September. Couldn't be more excited. As everyone know, we are it's happening in just a few weeks. We still have the free general passes still available, where you can hear obviously Ben Taylor, who's our guest today, as and our other keynotes speakers. If you are looking for hands-on instruction and want a training pass, we still have the 20% off ending this Friday. So guys, you have 2 days, just pick it up. Quickly, just moving on to the other one. Okay. Yes. In addition to the APAC, we have numerous virtual events that are coming up, including the live training from Matt Prince and Eric Ma on our AI Plus platform that is completely free. You can go and sign up. And don't forget to check out our ODSC West Bootcamp and Conference. That is a virtual and in-person event. Yes, guys, we are back with the in-person event. So looking forward to that. Super excited. Okay. Without any further ado, let me quickly move this out and let's have our guest, Ben, and my colleague Seamus here. Welcome, Ben. How's it going?
Good. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, Seamus.
Hi, Rabbit. Hi, Ben. Ben, super excited to have you back again. Always great having you as a guest. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah. No, I love this community. Anything I can do to share my mistakes, right?
Yeah. Ben.
Not too many. Not too many.
Definitely. So Ben, to start with, we have many folks joining us from across the world, globe. Guys, you can let us know where you're joining from. To start with, Ben, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah. So my name's Ben Taylor. I'm the Chief AI Evangelist for DataRobot, and I guess what else to say? My background's been kind of in a lot of different places. So I've worked in semiconductor, I've worked in quant finance, worked for an HR startup, and I co-founded a deep learning Automl company that joined the DataRobot family last year. And so now I work under marketing, but I still do programming, I still do code projects, but I do them through the lens of marketing, which is a lot of fun.
Amazing. And obviously, talking about your early days, you lived in woods.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I almost forgot. I am a bit of a weirdo. So when I went to college, I lived in the woods in the US, and it made national news. So I was on newspaper articles, radio talk shows. This was back in 2002, 2003. So if you Google homeless Ben, maybe at Utah, you'll find some backstory there. So I was a bit of a celebrity on campus. I felt like Forrest Gump.
Yeah, it's a great example. Everyone thinks there's a singular path to AI and data science, and
yeah. you have to be homeless first.
Sorry, yours were more unique paths. But yeah, a great story. People have time to check it out.
Amazing. Just moving on to today's one of the most important topics is ML Ops. ODSC featured this topic for last couple of years, and now ML Ops is hot. So Ben, why is everyone suddenly so excited about ML Ops? Tell us more about it.
Maybe everyone's excited because there's finally some accountability. Like we're past the hype cycle, right? So in 2017, right at the peak of the AI hype cycle, people might disagree on the exact time, but things are crazy. Like people are building out data science teams faster than they know what to do with them, and a lot of the people they're hiring are right out of school, PhDs, masters, right out of school, being thrown into these jobs. And it's almost like the AI community was existing in this experimental phase where they weren't really owning the full life cycle. So if you build a model, and I've done this before, where you build a model and you throw it over the fence to engineering, and they try to react to what you did. But what happens if you have to update the model? What happens if there's a feature drift excursion? And I've dealt with all of these things, and they're a real pain, like they're a nightmare. And so I think so that's actually really encouraging that people are kind of rallying behind MLOps, because it shows that AI is delivering value. It's being consumed, but it's being consumed in a way that we can put some change control around that, but also some protections. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. I like to tease people and say, how can you sleep at night? How can you go on vacation on the weekend with a model in production? And when you start going through the list of all the things that can go wrong, that you realize quickly that your notebook script that you wrapped in a Flask API is a very scary thing.
Wow,
Exactly.
definitely. So Ben, bring us into the weeds a little bit in terms of what are some of the primary problem challenges MLOps solves for a team or organization that you've seen recently.
Yeah. So one of the challenges is sometimes building a model can feel like this heroic effort, right? We have to go get data. It's quite hard. Where is it? We get it all together and we train a model. And then 6 months from now or 12 months from now, if I circle back and say, hey, we need to refresh this model. COVID happened. There's been a change in the market. We have new data. And what we find is you actually have to start back at zero, because you did this in a notebook, you weren't planning on it, and so there's no process for continuous deployment. And so getting into the weeds, some of the things that MLOps helps with is change control, version control, sign-offs. If you trained a model, how can I trust that model is that it's still valid? Can I deploy a model in parallel? If that model's outperforming yours, can I deploy it, redeploy it? So think about change control, version control, best practices, but then you also have models that behave poorly or they go off the rails. And this is where some people might be surprised. And I was definitely surprised. Like I was definitely, I've had 2 feature drift excursions in the wild from previous employers where that might confuse people because they're thinking the model is a static object. So the model hasn't changed. And a specific story here is we shipped a model and the model was great for 3 months. Customer is delighted. And then within 24 hours, the customer is now angry. And what happened? The model didn't change. It's still the same model, but we were consuming a very wide feature set. And part of that feature set came from a vendor. And that vendor decided to change the threshold that they thought was so minor, they didn't tell their customers. And so that trickled through our model and it ended up impacting one of our customers. And so feature drift detection, it can happen for a lot of reasons, like even with computer vision, or you can have sensors that go bad, things happen. You can have a fire. So we have all these forest fires in the US, and they can confuse a Tesla autonomous driving system, and that's an example of feature drift. Like that is a very different input than we've ever seen in the training set.
Yeah, sorry, Rabbit, if I may jump in here. Yeah, so just in terms of the problems ML Ops solves, Ben, it's kind of interesting because you've part of the ML Ops workflow that is specific to machine learning, such as feature selection, feature extraction, hyperparameter tuning, and then you have parts of it which you just mentioned, continuous monitoring, continuous integration, that are borrowed from DevOps, so to speak.
Yeah.
Can you speak? So I think a challenge for a lot of companies is it is a workflow. It is a pretty complicated life cycle. Can you speak a little bit to where people are finding success with ML ops, especially in terms of bringing in some of the proven techniques of DevOps? Because you touched upon that.
Yeah.
A while ago.
So when I think of success with ML ops, I think it's truly unlocking the scale that AI can bring. And by scale, I mean we have a customer that's approaching 1 trillion predictions. We have some customers that train 1,000 models per day. And so if you're getting into that scale, if you don't have ML ops, that's a guaranteed liability. Like one model is already a liability, and if you're training 1,000 per day, it's like this cancer cell or something. So ML ops working well, I feel like it's the key to finally unlock this flood of useful AI models for a business. The other thing I was thinking about, Seamus, is most of the stuff that MLOps does, it's stuff that data scientists don't care about. And this isn't an insult to them, but do they really care about the world in DevOps? Do they really care about version control? Do they really care about, does this, OS upgrade break my system? And most data scientists could care less. And that's not an insult. It's just the reality. They'd rather go and do innovation. They don't want to babysit. And so this is kind of the reality of babysitting these processes. And one quick thought that I think is funny to share with this group is, so when I worked at Intel and Micron, we had thousands of models that were deployed, and they had version controls and buddy sign-offs. They had feature drift detection, and they had escalation. So if these models were misbehaving, they would escalate through email, even paging. Like they would page engineers that would have a pager on their hip. And this was back in 2008. And I think what you're seeing is you have other disciplines like manufacturing, DevOps, where they have very strict rules and requirements, and AI, for some reason, has been accountable for that for the last decade. And so they're starting to inherit some of these best practices that we've already seen in other areas, right? Like manufacturing, there's already $1 million mistakes that are made in manufacturing. Why they have all of these systems in place to prevent that. And then DevOps, there's a lot of reason that exists as well, right? Like, I'm sure there's horror stories of someone just running like apt-get update and like taking an entire company down, and they weren't thinking about it. Like that's right. Like what are all the horror stories?
MLOps protects you. It's your cover your ass technology, if you want to say it. That problem well. Another, just coming out of that, sorry, Ravid, then I'll hand it back to you. But I see a lot of people in the last year or so have started to confuse AutoML and MLOps. So MLOps to me looks like a much more stretched out workflow. AutoML is interesting too, because that's also bleeding in. AutoML was around feature extraction, feature selection, hyperparameter tuning. I see some AutoML vendors, open source platforms are trying to pull in the data extraction, data transformation, profiling part of it, and then doing the AutoML model deployment. So yeah, would love to hear your thoughts on where, based on what you said, where AutoML fits into the MLOps landscape, so to speak.
Yeah. So AutoML, that's a great question. So AutoML, it's a very small part of the evolutionary pipeline when it comes to building a model, because you have to get the data, scope the problem, bring it into AutoML. So the benefit that AutoML brought was before, and I like joking with people in the industry. So if you look at people that are like gray-haired or gray-bearded people that have been here for a while, I like to joke that look kids, this used to be hard. So you guys have these fancy tools like Kubernetes and Docker is amazing. This used to be really hard, but that's also used to be really hard with machine learning. So if you wanted to build a model, you actually had to comb through your experience. Are you going to use random forest? Which version? Or are you going to use this other model? And you would be stuck trying a variety. So AutoML was able to kind of get rid of that, which is great. And I don't know if you remember the Seamus, but a lot of people fought the idea of AutoML. They're like, no. Like,
take my data science job.
Well, it's almost like they thought it was this impossible problem that like AutoML could never tune a model like I do. And
that was interesting. Coming from machine learning engineers and data scientists, that was an interesting concept. But
yeah, which I think is so funny, because it's like, really? Like, we can hyperparam tune the hell out of this and check every single model that you've never heard of.
There'll still be plenty of work to do.
Yeah,
there's plenty of work to do.
Yeah, so the important thing is that it's a very small step. So just building a model is a very small step, but how do you deploy that model at scale in a way that it can be consumed, it doesn't go down, it's reliable, it's robust to feature drift, it's robust to trust. So we talk a lot about trust and this idea of humble AI. And to drive the lesson home, let's say I'm so angry at fruit flies in my kitchen that I design like 100-watt laser system that if there's not a human in a kitchen, all fruit, anything living is dead. And I'm very proud of this AI system. Are you willing to walk into my kitchen? But I have an AI system. It'll detect if there's a person. It'll turn it off. Don't worry. And most people hesitate. Why are they hesitating? Because they're so concerned that my training set doesn't reflect them. So if you suddenly walk into my kitchen with like a red hoodie, game over. Like you might have lasers going off. And this hits on this idea of humble AI that we think a lot about, that you need to have AI systems that are smart enough that realize if they're leaving the training set. So this is very different than feature drift. Feature drift is when you have a significant drift in a feature set that I guess they're kind of similar. I guess I take that back because there is some overlap there. You need AI systems that can detect feature drift, but you also need AI systems that can raise the alarm and say, I'm unwilling to make a prediction. And so that's something that we've really pushed hard, that because the problem is if you make a prediction, that prediction might be consumed by a human. It could bias the human, or in the case of my laser system that kills fruit flies, it might just pull the trigger when you came to, or when my mother-in-law walked in the room, and it wasn't supposed to do that.
Got you. So note to self, don't walk into Ben's kitchen on Halloween dressed as a fruit fly. That could be a problem. No, that's really good. Yeah, so Automl, I see it as well. It's a productivity tool, especially for pilot phase and the build phase, whereas feature drift, definitely production. But that's great, Ben. Back to you, Rabbit. Sorry.
Yep. No, amazing discussion on AutoML, obviously. So Ben, my next question to you is: which parts of ML ops are well defined, and which parts need work now? What do you think?
So I think the parts that are well defined are things like version control, continuous deployment. Those make a lot of sense. Or even feature drift. Feature drift detection. Enough people have been burned by that, and I think one of the concerns to bring up to the community is, where are these lessons coming from? So feature drift detection, why is that? Did someone have a good idea on feature drift detection? I think the answer is no. People were burned. And so some of these protections in place, and maybe this is true, I'd be curious what your guys' reaction is with DevOps. Like a lot of the things we do them because someone was burned. We do them because a mistake was made. The goal is to be proactive, right? Like we would love to sit down and have an hour-long meeting on what are all the possible ways that this model could go wrong. But the reality today is they've already gone wrong so many times that we've had to build in these things. So I think things, to get back to your question, so when it comes to version control, kind of having that accountability on model sign-off, scaling is a huge thing. Like people don't want to think about scaling. They just want if your model needs to be consumed to 1 trillion predictions, that shouldn't be, you being a data scientist, that shouldn't be your problem. That should just happen. But then I think the concept of trust is new, it's emerging. So the idea of when can we have an AI model that essentially refuses to make a prediction because it's seeing something that's truly novel, or it's concerned that it's going back to like the fruit fly laser example, like it doesn't feel confident to make a prediction. And that, I think that's an emerging field in MLOps, is how do we put safeguards in place to stop AI from bias is one that we haven't talked about yet. Is humans, we have unconscious bias. When we think about that, we think about, in the US, we think about race, gender, and age, but bias can be everywhere. So in the housing market right now, you as a human appraiser, you could also have a bias where you think the housing market's going up too fast, it's going up too slow, and you could influence your appraisal. And so the human bias is always present, and figuring out how to mitigate it or reduce it is something that is becoming more top of mind. And I think that kind of lives under the MLOps umbrella.
Very logical.
Yeah, and Ben, sorry, you made a really important point about trust and responsible AI. And that's an interesting one, because that is not so much, you can't just put that, like I love these little diagrams where each step in the MLOps process is kind of like a cog. But trust and responsible AI, that's not something you can just fit in right before deployment or after deployment. It's kind of something that has to live through each step of the workflow. So how does one, everything from data collection to, doing feature selection, because, at any point in the workflow, you can introduce, or you can look at it as glass half full or glass half empty, trust and responsible AI. But do you want to talk a little bit about, because that's one thing I'm curious about, like some of these things, they don't just slot in as a task per se. They're more of, they have to tread through the entire workflow.
Yeah, that's a great point. So the thing I'm thinking about when you say that is kind of this data governance, like how if a table goes down, so let's say I'm consuming 10 different databases to go into this model, and if one database is suddenly unavailable, what am I supposed to do about it? Because I could make predictions. I could just, I'll impute those missing values and fill them with averages or whatever the ideal strategy was. But what are you supposed to do? So, or if there's like a change or something, a significant change to a data set, there's the thing you're reminding me of is a data scientist is such a small step in the process, right? They're relying on so many people upstream, and I can't control you upstream. So what if you decide to change a table, add a new value, drop a feature that I was depending on, or even drop an entire table that's now gone? Or maybe one of the feature sets was scraping, which is hugely problematic because that's now totally outside your control. And so, yeah, you hit on this point of data governance. It's not at the end. It actually kind of goes through the entire pipeline that you need.
Yep.
You need those systems in check all the way from the beginning to raise an alarm if something's changing.
Yeah, and pretty impossible to do that manually. So
yeah,
by itself would predicate the need for MLOps.
I was just reminded of one of the most important parts of model deployment, and that is storytelling. Storytelling at the prediction level. And so when I talk about storytelling, I like to tease the data science community and say, who are we telling a story for? The data scientists might think it's for them, but really, ideally, it's for the subject matter expert. It's for the human that's consuming the model, whether it's a clinician, physician, technician. It's someone downstream who may be less technical. And I think sometimes with predictions, they feel like a black box. I'm just going to say, I predict 80% confidence that this part has a defect or there's a quality issue. And I think one of the things that we're seeing investments in is how do we chase this to the bottom of the rabbit hole? And so to kind of raise the bar on this, what if I said, Seamus, this prediction is bad, and all of us are getting fired because of this one prediction, and you have 48 hours to explain this away or to fix it, otherwise we're all getting fired. And what this puts back on you is, what would you do? So if you had to tell a story to defend one prediction, what would you do? And you have like reason codes and other things like that, but you can also search similar predictions like there. And so that's one of the things I'm quite excited about, is how do we treat every prediction like it's the most important prediction? And how do we produce a story where you as the SME can defend the actions of the AI? Or you can override it. So if AI is saying, I don't feel comfortable in making a prediction, you can dive in and see what it would have done if it wanted to, but it's unsure. And then you as the human can make the final call. So we talk a lot about augmented intelligence, human and computers working together.
Excellent.
Right. Super interesting. Ben, we have a few questions from the audience. Why not just bring them up?
Sure.
Yep. From Aditi. Hey Ben, where do you see ML ops in the next 3 to 5 years? Interesting.
Yeah. No, and it's hard in the AI space to. I love these 3 to 5 year questions. 10 or 20 years becomes impossible, right? Like, are we going to have humans?
Ops on the moon.
Yeah. I'm hoping for a reality 15 years from now where I wake up in the morning, drink my coffee, and I talk to my home about all the cool stuff I worked on that night. And it'll explain to me where it got stuck. And then maybe I won't program anymore. And some people might think that's sad, but I would love that reality. I'm just talking to my home and it's doing all this really cool research. So for this question, where will MLOps be in the next 3 to 5 years? I think a trend that will continue to march forward is just this time to value, time to deployment. And so before, things would take many months, and now we're down to weeks and days and hours. And so this kind of hints at this idea of continuous AI. So you train a model today, why wouldn't you train it tomorrow and the next day? And that becomes a real mess for change control, because what if you're being steered off the rails? What if we have a regime change with COVID or something else and it's steering your continuously trained models away? What are the additional protections you need in place? So I feel like as we come to continuous AI with continuous version deployments, and you kind of almost lose this idea of discrete versions, you're going to need a new form of MLOps to really protect against. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say, like, if I just told you, hey, models are being trained every day and deployed, I'm sure somewhere in your mind you kind of have this like spidey sense of like, yeah, like you have some concerns there that we have to address. And then the other thing I think you'll see more investments in are this idea of trust. I think people will continue to invest in this. And I think if I had to predict where it's going, I would say pretend like every prediction gone wrong will get you fired. Or, you know, if I wanted to be more, the reality is some predictions gone wrong could get people killed. Like think of COVID, hospital supplies, like where things are supposed to go. And that's where we see AI headed. AI is headed into the most important decisions that we make. And so we need MLOps there to support us for that. So faster, smarter.
Amazing. Thanks for that question. Great answer, Ben. Okay, one more question that I'll pick from the audience. Very interesting one from Jonathan Pelmery. Ben Taylor, trust in AI is an interesting topic. How do you think making AI tools more readily available through MLOps is going to impact the use, ethics, and the trust of ML?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So as you make AI more accessible, that especially as you reduce the barrier to entry. So if it's just business analysts and developers and other people that are able to go through a no-code approach and deploy models, you're going to have models that are getting deployed in a lot of new areas. And that also raises concerns, because if I'm in HR, or if I'm in recruiting, or if I'm in some other part of the business, could I do something? Could I go ship a model that actually amplifies something that is now an increased liability, or it's doing harm? And so I think an important part of MLOps is it really does have to have ethics and trust embedded into it, to help protect us from ourselves. Think of AI as an amplifier. So AI, my understanding of AI, it's not going to suddenly produce evil out of nothing, but it will amplify a bias. So if there was already a bias in the data when it came to approving loans or a variety of things, AI will amplify that. And so I think you definitely need ethics and trust to kind of be woven in, because the goal is really just to raise awareness or raise the alarm. Because we do have examples where a bias is fine if it can be defended by performance or some other outcome. It depends on the industry, right? But it's important to be proactive. So if these systems can raise the alarm, let people know, we're detecting this bias. This is a human bias. How would you like to proceed? Then you can have one other thought I'm thinking about is we do a lot in banking, and with banking they already have very strict compliance where they require compliance documents for every model. And when I was in HR, we would also require compliance documents for every model. And so you can imagine this reality going forward, where every model that's trained, you essentially need a human to sign off on that model. And that there's what are they signing off for? They're really signing off on this ethical component that this model is doing what we intended. We've reviewed it for bias, etc.
Yeah, and just if I can add a comment there, explainable AI was hot a couple of years ago, still is. Now, with MLOps, you've a chance to embed tools like explainable AI, Lime, and things like that right throughout the workflow, and help people understand where you're coming up with the data, how your models are performing, how they're doing in production. Because I think that's, trust in AI is not just a single report, a single dashboard. You need to have trust and integrate those tools throughout the process. And I think that's the great potential for MLOps. But you may have questions about a model in production. You may have questions about the data that it was originated on, and being able to take that data and turn it into we know data science and machine learning, storytelling is a big part of that, and being able to turn this data into consumable content for decision makers and, like you said, HR people and people using these tools, so they can have some insight as to how these models perform, because I think so much of it is going to be automated. Data scientists and machine learning experts, part of their job is just understanding how the models work, right? And then being able to relay that to the other stakeholders is going to be a huge win that MLOps can provide.
I definitely agree. And Seamus, you remind me, I don't think you can trust an AI model until it tells you a story. And so leaning into that is the classic example of like, it's funny, I'm giving an example, but I hate this example. So I hate, anytime we talk about AI and we talk about like cats and dogs and bikes, and I hate all that stuff because it's stupid. It's not useful and it's not even inspiring. It's just dumb. But the classic example is the dog classifier, where AI is looking at the snow like on a wolf versus a dog. And that would be something where you would raise an alarm and say, oh, you're cheating. You should be paying attention to the dog, the fact that the snow is there. And so it's quite common for AI systems to cheat in a way that you didn't anticipate. And so I think you can't trust a system until it tells you stories. So if I design an AI system in my home that predicts if my room is messy, or like it, you know, if the downstairs room is messy, and if it just starts going off every time one of my kids walks into the room, it's not quite doing what I wanted. It's cheating. It's doing this correlation on, oh, there's a kid here. Kid is going to make this room messy in 5 minutes. That's not actually what I want. So you need it to tell. Yeah, so storytelling is absolutely a requirement for trusted AI.
Yeah, that's a great insight. I haven't heard it put like that before, Ben. That's very insightful.
Awesome. So moving on, we do have a few questions. I'll pick that up after this question, definitely. Do you feel organizations are adopting MLOps infrastructure now? Ben, what are some of the primary blockers that you see?
I think they're starting to. It's still kind of slow. It'd be great to see it adopted more. I think we still see the temptation of build it yourself, which is interesting, because it's all tuition, right? So you're going to have to pay the tuition somehow. And if I was building a system from scratch for MLOps, there's a long list of potential problems that I just have to pay tuition on, and then I will reactively build them in. So I think maybe the advice or the hope for some of these companies that are starting to look into this is the more they involve their engineering side, the more, because this already makes sense to engineers, right? This idea of version control, scalability, like if anything, they were already asking for this. And so I guess for these organizations, I would really lean into engineering and don't hope that your data science team can, because you can only be good at a few things. So if I come to you as a data scientist and I say, I'm brilliant at modeling, which I'm not, but if I told you I'm brilliant at modeling, but I'm also brilliant at scaling, and if I go down this long list of engineering things, you're going to start to wonder, what are you actually good at? Because most people can't be good at everything. And that is true when it comes to scaling AI systems out and all the stuff that just feels like an engineering, like a very focused engineering problem that most data scientists are not equipped to handle.
Very true, Ben. And there was a relatable question as well coming from an audience. Is MLOps a separate job, or it's one of the skills that data scientists should have?
Maybe I'm not really qualified to speak up on this one, because I think I do see some companies where they're looking at, maybe data engineering, or where they would have headcount specific to this, where you're going to focus on managing this. Your typical data scientist, I would not necessarily see them as being an MLOps creator, maybe an MLOps user. So they might leverage some existing platform or technology, but to write these systems from scratch, I would not expect a data scientist to do that well. And I'm speaking from experience, because I've done that before, and you don't do it well.
Yeah, and I would love to jump in here, if you don't mind, Ben. I'm pretty fascinated by this because, as you said, it's a pretty MLOps can be quite involved, and one of the reasons I'm very excited about MLOps is the career opportunities it offers people, because I'm very much at the mindset is the further we go along on the machine learning AI path, whatever you want to call it, the more opportunities there's going to be for individuals out there. You see DevOps turning into data ops, which is turning into MLOps. So when I look at the MLOps workflow, I see opportunities in there for data engineers, for sure. I see opportunities for data analysts. I see opportunities for data visualizers, storytellers. I look at the data scientist role as more on the statistics, maths, the tuning, the modeling, as you said, the machine learning, slightly more on the programming side. I see new roles coming out, like think about the QA. Like QA engineering a decade ago was all manual. Now you have what's it called, automated QA or something like that. There'll definitely be a role within the AI world where your job is just continuously deploying. Like that's a Kubernetes experts now get very, very well paid. You could just be an expert in one part of the MLOps workflow and get very well paid for it. So I don't think there's sure some companies will have you'll have the this unicorn who can do all the tasks, but I think there's a ton of opportunities there for a lot of people. If you're math first or stats first or code first or data first, then you'll have individual roles and gateways into this. So I think it's, as a career opportunity, it's hugely exciting. It can seem like it's a lot of confusing stuff, but companies will figure this out, that it's a multi-role task, and that's going to create a lot of opportunities for a lot of people. And that's one of the things that gets me really excited about this, because no one person, even no one department can handle this, right? I think it brings in the data team, data architects, data warehousing team. That brings in the data science team, the machine learning team, the IT team, software development. So yeah, a lot of opportunity here.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And before I ask you about Data Robot, obviously, I just want to remind the audience that we are giving away free pass today for APAC, our upcoming conference. So don't forget to put in hashtag APAC in the comments to win passes, and Irina is out there. So Ben, a very important question that I wanted to ask is about how is Data Robot picking up with MLOps? I've heard a lot of acquisitions happening, a lot of partnerships too. So
so we had our recent Algorithmia acquisition. So I'm actually gonna be flying up to Seattle next week because that finally closed, and so I know that's a further investment in MLOps for us. Data Robot's actually, it's funny because they've been doing MLOps for a while now, but I think they've struggled with their branding and their awareness. So it's more of a marketing problem than a solution problem, and so there's a lot of catch up there on the Data Robot side, because I think we have acquisitions that, I believe 2 acquisitions now that have gone directly into the MLOps space, but I would argue we've had a fairly mature MLOps offering for a while now. And I should know, like, some of these awards and things top of mind. Like I know, I'm probably going to get like my hand slapped. Like product is like, oh my hell, like we won all these awards, you idiot. Like you're supposed to know this. And maybe I'll share a link in the comments if I can go dig up some of these MLOps leader rankings. But that I guess the kind of bookend of that is Data Robot's always going to care what are the applied use cases. Like what are people, if you're doing 1 trillion predictions, what do you need? And so any of the MLOps investment is going to very much focus on the applied value that's going back to the client, because that's kind of the space that we live in.
Ben, if I may ask, I'm really fascinated by the trillion predictions. What are the industries that are kind of going towards that? Because I can see online retail. Is that more like when you're? Yeah, I don't ask loaded questions here, but yeah. So I don't have experience doing predictions at scale like that. So if you can give us kind of like the backstory there, and again, you don't have to name companies or anything like that, but give us, generally where you think some place in the industry that are picking this up. I could know, like you, I worked in finance, so I could definitely see that being applied in finance at the individual stock level, going across the whole Russell 5,000, was it, or 15,000? I can't remember now. It's been a long time, but give us an idea where this thing can just blow stuff out of the water.
Yeah, it's interesting because just like every company is a database company, right? Like find me a company that doesn't have a database somewhere, even your coffee barista in the morning.
ODSC, like database company. Yeah,
like every company is a database company, and I think we're very quickly approaching this reality that every company is an AI company. And so the use cases we're seeing are all over the map, whether it's airlines, automotive. I'm actually looking at, we have this pathfinder.datarobot.com where we have different use cases, but manufacturing, healthcare, education, sporting is big, retail. Sporting is one that surprises me, Seamus. So we actually have a decent number of sporting clients. Ari Kaplan, he's kind of our Moneyball guy. So he's all things sports analytics, which is really fascinating because when you look into sports, these are big money making things. Like you look, like we talk about how much these players are made, but they're paid that much for a reason. They're paid that much because there is a lot of money that is made for these sporting teams, especially if they win and do well, and if they can retain their fan base with the tickets, but also probably more importantly the swag and all the gear that people buy. And so some of these bigger prediction examples, they're coming in from retail, they're coming in from sporting, which is really interesting. Cool. So I think the scale is something that you hunt for. So when we're going for it, it's funny because when I had my startup early on, when before we started figuring out the value-based pricing, I was actually kind of embarrassed when we get to pricing. And this kind of goes into this core reason, like, why would you be embarrassed if I'm going to announce my SaaS pricing to you? Well, it's because I haven't aligned it to value. Because if I've aligned it to value, it doesn't matter what the number is. If I tell you it's $10 million a year, you actually aren't going to care if it's delivering $100 million in value. So, so in the discovery process, one of the leading questions I like to ask is, where's your growth bottleneck by human capital? If you could hire 1,000 people that were experts, where would you put them? That can help shine a light on an opportunity. But the other question I like to ask is, if we made a small improvement in a very large number, what would that number be? And that's where you find these scale problems, where if we could change this a few percent, this massive number of 100,000 SKUs or something like that, like supply chain stuff, that then translates into a big number on value. So I think discovery is interesting because sometimes people start with the shiny new toy. I want AI. It's really cool. I want to put it somewhere. And that's you have to work backwards. You have to go find a monster problem, and then you back into the right solution. And the right solution might be quite simple.
Pretty sweet. Awesome.
That was an amazing question.
I like to joke that the boring problems are worth the most. So when you go into a big business, sometimes I think in AI and data science, people are listening. We really have this intrinsic like geek curiosity. We want to do things that are really cool. We want to go build this AI tower that's impossible. But we find in industry that some of the most boring problems offer the most value, like loss prediction and insurance, credit card default prediction. Like these things are massive money makers.
Deep value,
done well. Yeah, but they're not that exciting. You're not going to write a PhD thesis on credit card defaulting, or
you can get really excited in the data, get your hands dirty.
Yeah,
it's like that stuff.
This will show how jaded I am from the startup days. I like to say, if you're ever starting a project with, wouldn't it be cool if, I don't need to hear the rest of it. I know it's a bad idea.
Ben, I got this great idea. Wouldn't it be cool?
No. Stop.
Susan says that's so true, like fixing dirty data.
Hey, Susan. Good to see you.
So, Ben, obviously, Seamus asked you a question where the industries are, picking up with sectors. But what do you think? Which industries have not adopted MLOps but could have a big future impact if they do?
Well, I'd hate to stereotype some industries this way, but I think when you think of some industries have very high risk consequence. So when you think of manufacturing and healthcare and banking, like this is actually an urgent requirement for them. They can't. To make this more fun, I like to talk about like the oops scenario. So which industries like to say oops? Healthcare, banking, manufacturing? No, they don't like to say oops.
Not at all.
But maybe to throw my own department under the bus, or just marketing, marketing, they're a little bit more like, oh, this ad campaign didn't work out like I thought. Oops, this model wasn't as good. So So I think when it comes to MLOps adoption, the industries that have the least tolerance for oops, the ones that are the highest consequence decisions, they're going to be rapid adopters, because when they say oops, people get fired. And then the industries that, maybe marketing, some of these things, maybe sales, it's funny because every industry I mention in this new category, the oopsables, they'll be insulted because they'll be like, what are you talking about? Like, We have real jobs too. We're not shooting from the hip on everything. But compared to healthcare and manufacturing and banking, it's a different world there. Like they, so that's the way I think about the adoption cycle is the consequence of mistakes will kind of be a good indicator of how rapidly you adopt these types of protections.
Yeah,
great way of putting it. Yeah.
So Ben, obviously, I want to ask you more about the learning path, but before that, I have a quick question from the audience. That is from Asmita. Where should one start MLOps? Any specific knowledge we should start acquiring first?
Oh man, this is a frustrating question. Not frustrating for the user, but frustrating for the reality of the answer. And the reality is, I've heard multiple people ask this, like, where do I go to learn more about MLOps? And I had someone complaining saying, I want to buy a book on MLOps, but I feel like I could write my own book because they actually have like applied experience. So unfortunately, I don't think I guess I'd lean on community. And maybe that's a follow-up for me. So I'll take an action to figure out, like, because I'd love to route people to where should you go to learn more about MLOps, but really share in the mistakes that have been made. Because I'd say MLOps is a big umbrella that protects you from all the oops events. And so where can you go to learn about all of the potential problems that would surprise you, that they're not going to show up in a potential problem analysis because you never thought that this particular issue could show up?
Yeah, and if I can comment on that, I have a little piece of advice that people can take with a grain of salt, but obviously it depends on the context where you're coming from. So, for example, if you're already a data scientist and you're a statistician or data analyst, and you're more interested in data MLOps, pick up a DevOps book and skim through it and look at sections that you're unfamiliar with, such as data integration, continuous deployment. Like continuous deployment, if you're a data scientist, can be numbingly boring, perhaps. And then you'll learn about tools like Jenkins and stuff like that. But it can be, once you get into it, it can be kind of interesting. So again, it depends on your approach, right? But one piece of advice, if you're not coming from a kind of a code first or a DevOps background, pick up, because DevOps has been around a long time. Automated QA has been around a long time. So skimming or looking at blog posts and articles on that can really help you put that into context. The one that's definitely harder is people coming into the field, brand new. They're not, they're just beginning their data science career. They want to learn about MLOps. That one's definitely trickier, but just understanding the various pieces to MLOps is interesting. And then, looking at from, where do you start at the beginning? And that's the data collection, data profiling, data transformation side, and then going through to the stuff like that. I don't know, it's an automated version of the machine learning workflow. So if you understand the machine learning workflow, pick up a little bit of DevOps, you'll understand MLOps. But it's like I said, a lot of opportunity there. It's a big field.
Amazing. Thanks for that, Srimesh. Okay, quick question from George. We are open to questions, so any questions for Ben, feel free to ask. Hi, George. Is there a particular project problem that you recommend one should start with in their learning journey, Ben?
This one's a little tricky. So, particular project or problem that I'd recommend in their learning journey, I'd always recommend find a project or a problem that you're very passionate about, because AI is moving so quickly. If you're in it for the money, and if you take a rational approach, and if you're not passionate and motivated, you're going to have a really hard time keeping up. And so I always recommend, if you're doing this for work, you want to find projects that align more with the value for the employer. But if you're doing this to kind of ramp up yourself, good to see you, by the way, George, I would find projects that will wake you up early on the weekend, and because you'll learn the most. They're going to pull you. It won't feel like a chore. I was just reminding myself, I've been out of school for so long, but now that I've got nieces and nephews starting to go to college, I was reminding myself how much I hated school. Like I hated going to college. And why did I hate it? I had no passion around, I had passion around some disciplines and topics, but I would hate for that to be true for people in the audience, where they're just maybe like Seamus is mentioning, like cracking open a DevOps book. Maybe that is just a sideways pill to swallow. Just do that on a weekend. But if you had to do that every weekend,
hey, I love my DevOps books.
Well,
puts me to sleep every night.
Maybe that's a good indicator of whether or not someone wants to go into an ML ops role or like a data engineering role. Like if you find some of that stuff is interesting, because I will tell people I'm a high performance computing nerd. I'm not an AI nerd. So I do love scale. I do love the idea of like massive systems just hammering away. I think for me, that's interesting. But yeah, find problems and projects that really light the fire inside you and make you want to wake up early on the weekend.
Fantastic answer, Ben. Okay, Ben, this is amazing information about ML ops, about AI, data storytelling, DevOps. I think we've spoken about a lot of topics. So thanks for that. Also, Ben, can you tell us about your keynote that is coming up for the APAC ODSC? What's the title? What are you going to talk about?
Yeah. So the title of the keynote is Building Models That Change Our Lives and Society for Good. Because I think, and maybe a teaser under this title is, I think sometimes when we think of AI, we think of like going from A to B, or you're essentially building a widget, or you're building a thing, a tech thing. And I think the thing I really want to drive home to the audience is people in the audience can build models that will change the world forever, whether it's predicting sudden cardiac death or other things. There's the value that AI can bring into your community is things that, for me, they give me purpose. Like they can have a lasting impact for good. And so I kind of want to dive into that in a way that's, tangible and real, where people see that they can make lasting changes for good, whether it's for themselves or for society when it comes to AI.
Wow, can't wait, Ben. It already seems so interesting. So looking forward to that. Okay, a quick one, Seamus, can you tell us more about the APAC event for our audience?
Yeah, there's only one thing to know. If you want to listen to Ben, hear more from Ben Taylor, come to APAC. No, a few other things. We're hugely excited about that. For those of you who know ODSC's history, we did ODSC India in 2018, 2019. I had a chance myself to travel to that amazing country, hoping to get back in 2022. But we've expanded into ODSC APAC, and one of the key things about APAC is we're highlighting some of the amazing talent that's in the APAC region. We have speakers from Philippines, we have speakers from Australia, we have speakers from, of course, India. We've actually got some amazing speakers from some of the top research institutions in India, especially around the topic of NLP and multilingual NLP. So that's a pretty awesome program that Ravid and the rest of the speaker team have worked on. So do check that out. And then
about the class.
Oh yeah, and wanted to mention, as you guys know, all these webinars and things we have, they're available on AI Plus for free. It's our Ben mentioned continuous quite a few times, so think of it as continuous learning. As we know, learning data science and AI is a bit like drinking from a fire hose. So think of this as our continuous ODSC platform. You can create a free account there. You'll see all our webinars, including this one, will be available. So if you're looking for this talk, to share it, it'll be on YouTube, LinkedIn. It'll also be on AI Plus. There's other talks on there. If you're just starting your career, we have data literacy talks on data as well as AI. And then there's also a 7-day free trial. So if you're looking to learn about supervised learning, unsupervised learning, if you're a bit rusty in your math, if you want to do a certificate in machine learning, if you want to do a boot camp, it's all there. So thanks for bringing that up, Ravid. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Seamus. Okay, one last question to Ben before we wrap this up. Ben, when are you planning to create a course or write a book or something on those lines?
Oh man, when I'm dead.
Ghost, that brings new meaning to the word ghost.
Actually, that answer I gave was terrible. So I've thought before about, man, that'd be, because I worked on that Xbox project, which I thought was a lot of fun, where I was teaching reinforced learning to play Call of Duty on the Xbox, and I thought geez, after going through this with this gimmicks adapter, like this was hard. I'd love to just have this written down or like have a book. And I think for some people, that would light a fire under them. They'd be like, oh, I want AI to play my other Xbox game, and understanding how to do that. That's interesting. The problem is always time. The most encouraging thing I heard about writing a book, I actually do have an interest in writing a book. But maybe after, in the future, a couple of years from now, after Data Robot kind of continues to grow. But Seamus, one of the things I heard talking to an author was he talked to his phone for a month, just like voice notes, and then he gave it to a ghostwriter, and they wrote a book that became a New York Times bestseller. And I thought, well, I can talk to my phone for a month in the car. That sounds doable, but like writing a book, that sounds... And I know there's a lot of people in the data science community, and I know Ravit probably knows most of them, but like writing a book, holy crap, the amount of time and effort that goes into it. Like,
all right, Rabbit, let's do a deal here. So you talk to your phone for a month, give us the notes, and we'll see what we can do with it then.
Oh yes, definitely.
Rabbit is right though. He's on something. I'm sure anything. Once you do get the time to write that book, it's going to be pretty spectacular. You're definitely one of the the stories you provide us with, Ben, are always insightful, because we have a lot of people who know the science of data science and whatnot, but you give it some great color. So always such a pleasure to have you on and get your insights and the color behind it. Always great.
Yeah, thank you. This has been fun, and I'm excited for the event next week.
Amazing. Looking forward to it.
2 weeks, Ben. 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Oh, 2 weeks. That's right.
I'm not going for that counter invite.
Oh, yeah.
That's on us.
All right, guys, this was fun. Thank you very much. And to the audience joining us and asking amazing questions. We are looking forward to seeing you guys on the 15th and 16th during our APAC conference. So do not forget to tune in. I've mentioned the link in the post itself, so you can check it out. Thank you very much, Ben. Again, looking forward to your keynote.
Okay.
Ben.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.